Okay, so we're diving into um, these LA wildfires, January 2025.
Yeah,
And it's a lot to process, right? You're trying to make sense of it.
it really is.
With all this news coming at you and just the scale of it all,
hmm
it's completely understandable if you're feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So we're going to use two articles as our sources for this deep dive, one from LAist and one from AP News.
Okay.
The LS is focusing more on the immediate impact, and AP is kind of looking into like the potential causes.
Yeah.
So we're going to unpack, what happened, why it matters, and just like the bigger questions all this raises.
Sure.
But first, let's just take a second to acknowledge, like, the human toll this is taking.
I think that's really important.
This isn't just some news story. This
Yeah.
is impacting a lot of people.
It is.
It's heavy stuff.
Yeah, it's really striking to me that the LAist article really opens with that human cost.
Oh, interesting.
It's not even like about the fire itself so much, you know? It's over 100,000 people evacuated.
Wow.
At least 16 confirmed deaths.
Oh, wow.
And they emphasize that number is likely to rise.
Oh, gosh.
And then potentially over 10,000 structures just gone.
Those numbers are just staggering.
Staggering.
And they go beyond those numbers, too. They
Yeah.
mentioned that, like, they have friends and colleagues that have lost their homes.
Yeah.
And, like, whole neighborhoods are wiped out.
Right.
And it makes it so real when you hear about people being directly affected.
Absolutely. It becomes more than just statistics at that point, right? It's about lives that are just completely disrupted.
Yeah.
And to put this into like historical context,
Okay.
Elaist quotes the fire chief, calling the Palisades fire one of the most destructive in the city's history.
So this isn't just another fire.
No, this is like a historical event for LA.
Wow. So we've got this immense human cost.
Yeah.
But what, actually ignited this?
Right.
What caused it?
Yeah, that's where this AP News article comes in.
Okay.
It really kind of takes on this almost detective role,
Oh, interesting.
trying to figure out the cause. Okay.
So, the usual suspects are lightning, arson, utility lines, or, just plain old human error.
Mm-hmm.
AP News says that lightning's off the table.
Okay.
So that narrows it down a bit.
So it's like investigators are combing through a crime scene
Precisely.
in Pacific Palisades, like looking for clues around where it began.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. And
And there's this fascinating development with Southern California Edison.
oh, okay.
AP News mentions that they filed a report about the Eaton fire,
Okay.
but they deny being responsible.
Interesting.
However, it gets really interesting because insurance lawyers have already sent out evidence preservation notices.
Wait, evidence preservation notices? What are those?
So it's basically a legal order
Okay.
demanding that potential evidence related to the fire be preserved.
Got it.
And this happens when lawyers suspect that, litigation might be coming,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to ensure that evidence isn't tampered with or destroyed. So even though Edison is saying, hey, we're not involved, these lawyers are already, gearing up for potential lawsuits.
Yeah.
That definitely adds, another layer to all this.
It does. And the AP News article also points out that Edison claims that there weren't any power anomalies in the hours leading up to the Eaton fire.
Interesting.
But, and this is the key point, their report came out after the lawyers got involved.
So it makes you wonder if the timing of their report is a coincidence or a strategic move.
Right?
Didn't they face similar scrutiny after the 2017 Thomas fire?
They did.
That was linked to their equipment, right?
It was, yeah. The Thomas fire was a massive, massive disaster.
Yeah.
And Edison ultimately had to pay billions in settlements.
Wow.
So seeing their name pop up again in connection with these fires is definitely raising eyebrows.
Yeah.
And it raises questions about whether this is like a recurring issue for them.
It's almost like a pattern.
Yeah.
And then you have the human error aspect too.
Yeah.
This situation with Edison kind of reminds me of that gender reveal party
Oh, yeah.
that sparked a massive wildfire back in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sobering reminder that even seemingly harmless actions can have devastating consequences.
Absolutely.
Especially in a dry, fire-prone environment like California.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
It's just crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think about. So it feels like we're dealing with this perfect storm here.
Yeah.
A combination of potential infrastructure issues, human actions, and just this environment that's primed for disaster.
Absolutely.
But even as the investigations are still ongoing,
right.
these fires are forcing us to confront a harsh reality living with fire in California.
Yeah.
And that brings us to like a much bigger picture.
It does. It does. These events can't be separated from that larger issue of climate change.
Okay.
Increased dryness and hotter temperatures.
Right.
They're making these events more frequent, more intense.
Yeah. And the At Least article mentions like curfews, looting, a health emergency because of all the smoke.
Oh, wow.
The immediate aftermath is just pure chaos.
Yeah.
But like, what are the long-term consequences
Right.
of a disaster of this scale? Like, how does a city even begin to recover from this?
That's the challenge, isn't it? Rebuilding communities, mitigating future risks, and just like adapting to this new reality.
It's daunting.
Yeah.
But like the Ellis article doesn't just leave us with like a sense of doom and gloom.
Right.
They offer a ton of resources,
Yeah.
like on evacuation prep,
Okay.
driving in fire conditions, helping victims, and more. This isn't just like theoretical information. It's like practical knowledge
Right.
that could actually save lives.
Yeah, preparedness is key.
Yeah.
What like specifically jumps out at you from those resources?
Honestly, the evacuation checklist
Oh, yeah.
is like a game changer. It's so easy to just like panic in an emergency. Forget like the essential things. Having a like pre-packed bag with important documents, medications, even just a change of clothes could make a world of difference.
Absolutely. And it extends beyond just our own needs, too, right?
Right,
Like
yeah.
having a plan for pets is crucial as well.
Of course.
And the Hoist article has some great tips for that.
Okay.
It's easy to overlook those things in the heat of the moment.
It makes you realize how many things we like take for granted
Yeah,
until they're gone.
it's true.
Yep.
Yeah.
Simple things like a go bag with a flashlight, extra batteries, a first aid kit. These can be lifesavers.
And it's not just about the physical preparations, it's the mental preparedness, too.
Right.
Like, knowing what to do in a fire emergency can really help you stay calm
Yeah.
and make better decisions under pressure.
Yeah. The Eliost Guide on Driving in Fire Conditions is something I never really considered before.
Oh, interesting.
Like being surrounded by like smoke and flames, knowing how to navigate safely could mean the difference between life and death.
It's true. And preparedness isn't just about protecting ourselves either, right? It's
Right.
about helping the community.
That's a great point. Ellie's talks about helping fire victims
Yeah.
and like avoiding common pitfalls, like donating unwanted items,
Yeah.
It's about making sure our like good intentions are actually helpful.
Exactly. And this brings us back to that tension between individual actions
Okay.
and the larger systemic issues.
Can you unpack that a bit more? What do you mean by that?
Well, on one hand, we have this responsibility to be prepared, make good choices, help those in need.
Right.
But on the other hand, we have to acknowledge these larger forces at play.
Climate change, for example.
Precisely. These wildfires are just screaming at us that climate change isn't some future threat. It's
Yeah.
happening now.
It is.
And it's making these events, more frequent, more intense, more destructive.
So like, what can we do about it?
Right.
It feels so huge, so overwhelming.
It is a huge problem, but that doesn't mean that we're powerless.
Okay.
We can advocate for policies that address climate change, support organizations that are working on mitigation and adaptation,
Right.
and make changes in our own lives to reduce our carbon footprint.
One thing that really stuck with me from the AP News article was this quote from a fire investigator.
Oh, okay.
He said, "It's going to go out when it runs out of fuel or when the weather stops."
Wow.
It just felt so bleak.
Yeah, I understand.
It like highlights the power of nature and the limits of our control,
It does.
but it also made me think about that, like fuel aspect. Like we can't control the weather,
Right.
but we can control how we manage like our forests and wildlands.
That's a crucial point. Yeah, there's a lot of debate about like the best way to manage forests,
Right.
but like being proactive is essential.
And it's not just about preventing fires, it's about making our communities more resilient to them.
Exactly. Building homes with fire-resistant materials,
Oh, all right.
creating defensible spaces around structures,
Right.
having like really strong evacuation plans in place.
Are we like past the point of simply fighting fires? Do we need like a fundamental shift
Right.
in how we approach this issue?
Yeah.
Do we need to start accepting that fire is like an inevitable part of the California landscape?
That's the question, isn't it?
It is.
It's about adapting to a new reality.
Yeah.
And that requires like a collective effort.
Where do we go from here? Like, what are the next steps?
I think the first step is to just acknowledge the complexity of this problem.
What do you mean?
Well, we can't just like point fingers
Right.
at one cause or one solution.
Mm-hmm.
These wildfires are the result of like this complex interplay of factors,
Right.
you know,
Hmm.
climate change, human behavior, land management practices.
Okay.
It's not about placing blame.
Right.
It's about like understanding the bigger picture.
So it's not as simple as just blaming like utility companies or
Yeah.
arsonists.
Right. While those factors might play a role in specific fires, they're not the whole story.
Got it.
We need to look at how all these elements are interconnected.
Okay.
We need to see the forest for the trees, so to speak.
And once we like understand the complexity,
Yeah.
then we can start working towards like effective solutions.
Exactly. Solutions that involve both like individual actions and collective responsibility.
Okay.
You know, we need individuals to take responsibility for their own preparedness and communities to come together
Yeah.
to create more resilient systems.
It sounds like a massive cultural shift.
It is.
Like a new way of thinking about our relationship with fire.
It is. And it won't be easy.
Right.
It'll require education, collaboration, and a willingness to change our behaviors.
Right.
But it's essential for our survival.
After all this, you might be asking yourself, what can I actually do?
Right.
You know, it can feel overwhelming,
It can.
but even small actions can contribute to a solution. So what can you do right now, today, to start making a difference?
Right.
Besides checking out those Ellie's resources, of course.
The most important thing is to simply start paying attention.
Okay.
Pay attention to the issue of wildfires, the impacts of climate change,
Right.
the choices we make in our own lives.
Got it.
Knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And the more we understand about the problem, the better equipped we'll be to find solutions.
And it's not just about understanding it. It's about like holding our leaders accountable.
Absolutely.
We need to demand action
Yes.
from our elected officials, from utility companies, from anyone in a position to like make a difference.
These wildfires are a wake-up call,
Yeah.
a stark reminder that we can't keep doing things the way we've always done them.
Right.
We need to act, and we need to act now.
It feels like these fires are like a challenge to create a more sustainable and resilient future. A future where we like learn to live with fire rather than fear it.
I agree. And one thing that keeps coming up for me as we examine these LA fires is this question of scale.
What do you mean?
Oh,
like
yeah.
the sheer size of the fires themselves.
That too, of course. You know,
Yeah.
the acreage burned is staggering.
Right.
But I'm also thinking about the different scales at which this problem exists.
Okay.
You know, we've talked about individual preparedness, community resilience, national policies, even global climate change.
Right.
It's a problem with so many layers.
It's like those Russian nesting dolls.
Exactly.
Every time you open one,
Yeah.
there's another one inside.
Right. And that can feel overwhelming, right?
It is.
Like, where do you even begin to tackle something so multifaceted?
It's definitely a lot to process,
Yeah.
but maybe that's the point, right? To realize that there's no single solution,
Right.
no magic bullet.
Yeah. It's going to take a multi-pronged approach.
Exactly. And that's where you, the listener, come in.
That's right.
We've given you a lot of information in this deep dive.
Yeah.
You've got the facts, the context, the resources. Now it's time to ask yourself, what resonates with you?
Yeah.
Where do you feel drawn to act?
I love that.
It's not about feeling obligated to do everything.
Right. It's about finding your own entry point, your own way to make a difference.
Maybe you're inspired to create a fire safety plan for your family.
Okay.
Maybe you're fired up to contact your elected officials about climate policy.
Right.
Maybe you want to volunteer with a local organization supporting fire victims.
Or maybe you just want to, like, learn more about forest management practices in your area.
Exactly. There are so many ways to engage with this issue. The important thing is to find what feels meaningful to you.
And to remember that even small actions can have a ripple effect.
It's easy to feel like our individual actions don't matter
Right.
in the face of such massive challenges, you know?
Right.
But imagine if everyone who listened to this deep dive made one small change in their lives.
The collective impact would be huge.
Exactly.
What if everyone just did a little? It really adds up.
It does.
It's about shifting our mindset from, like, I can't do everything,
Right.
to I can do something.
And remembering that we're not alone in this.
We're not.
There are countless individuals, organizations, communities, all working towards a more sustainable future.
We can all be part of that movement.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Hmm.
let's leave our listener with one final thought.
Okay.
Something to, chew on, something to spark further exploration.
Both articles touch on the role of technology in these fires.
Oh, interesting.
Edison's power lines, the communication networks used for evacuations,
Uh-huh.
the social media platforms spreading information.
Yeah.
Technology is everywhere in this story.
Technology is a double-edged sword, right?
It is.
It can both exacerbate the problem and be part of the solution.
Here's the question for you to consider.
Okay.
How can we harness the power of technology to create a more fire-resilient future?
That's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
And one that I hope our listeners will continue to explore. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Of course.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay safe.